Did it again. I couldn't find there was a bunch of stuff under there and I just couldn't find myself. How are you this morning?
Good, Jenny White. How are you?
I'm fine. So I bet you were one of the ones who went downtown and did the yay.
Wasn't me, but I'm surprised I didn't see you down there on TV.
Oh yeah, because that's my jam.
Babies.
Bread and circuses is my deal.
Now my kids did go down there. My son, heck, I think he went down there like 7:00.
Really?
Yeah, he's a big Thunder fan though. He wants to. He wants to be a commentator, sports commentator.
Well, I mean, people do it, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's not a job. It's a job for sure.
I don't know if that'll help our cause.
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows what he can be, Michael? He can be anything. That's the beauty of being young and not old. Dave says every day, just think, honey, every day we have one less thing to have to think about on the horizon. We have one less possibility. Like, yeah, that's right. That's great. Gracie Colvin says, good morning. Good morning, Gracie. How are you?
Good morning, Gracie.
So we have kind of a not awesome show this morning.
Yeah, it's scary. It literally is just I mean, I hate that this stuff even happens at all, let alone no one else covering it. But I mean, as a parent, it's really scary.
Well, see, I think the problem is, hold on. So we have to give Roberta props because she's actually on time today. Good job, Roberta. And Julia's on. So good morning to Julia. So I think you hit the first big thing is that nobody reports on it. Right?
Yeah.
But then I want to make a huge point. I'm looking funny because so after I talked with Mary, I sent a letter to Phil Backrack, who is the public relations guy for Gettner Drummond, our AG. And I said, hi, Phil. I saw the piece released today by our friends at Visit Vantage. Where is Lincoln? With all the problems at the Oklahoma Mental Health and Substance Abuse Agency, it seems as though an investigation from our AG is fitting, as this case is truly horrific. Would the AG or someone from your office like to come on the program and talk about investing this case with the author of the piece? Please let me know what you think. There's quite an outcry over this particular situation. So Phil did return my email. Hi, Jenny. Hope you're doing well. Let me check with our folks to see if we're aware of this case, and if so, whether that's something we could talk about. As a general rule, we don't confirm or deny the potential existence of an active investigation. So I just wanted everybody to know that that's where we are with the AG's office. So, and the AG is running for governor. So if we believe that things are going to get better at DHS and so there you go.
Hey, I always like the best thing about all of it is always, I can't comment about what's going on. I can't tell you anything about what's not or what is not going on. I always love that.
Well, it solves a lot of problems, doesn't it, Michael? I mean, if you just can't talk about it, then
yeah, that's like the lamest excuse of all time.
So many things. So, okay, well, let's bring our friend Mary on here this morning. And good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Jenny.
Let's visit with Mary.
Let's visit with Mary. Good morning. I so appreciate you all giving this time to this case. And I'm going to tell you that the biological mother of Lincoln is on with us today. Her name's Gardenia, and she's been amazingly transparent about this situation. unlike every government layer that's involved in this, which has basically given the same response that you got from our AG's office. The Oklahoma DHS cannot confirm or deny is what we got at first. And until Gardenia reached out to me after our first 2 reports on this case, I could not confirm or deny that this child was ever involved with DHS, but she did an amazing job giving all of the details, all of the documents, all of the evidence and receipts about what has happened to her family and the harm that this child remains, the risk of harm this child remains in. So thank you, Gardenia. I appreciate you more than I can say.
So let's get going right away.
Okay.
Because I'm you know, you do a great job, and it was, as I was listening to you on Jake's show this morning, I was remembering how we met. Do you remember how we met?
Was it? I think you reached out to me over the How to Steal a State series that really outlined how many of our politicians were working through the politics of public education to take over our state. And in many respects, I feel like we're there. And
I read that series and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this woman.
It's been a fruitful connection. I so appreciate you both and the Rope Report. You cover so many angles and so many topics that are important, and this is definitely one of them. The Lockmans, Gardenia's family, is not a one-off when you hear this story. There are many, many families that have suffered overreach from the Department of Human Services, their collusion with the courts, their collusion with law enforcement. And it is essentially, the story is about government reaching into the most fundamental right to raise your own children. And then hiding behind privacy laws. We're unable to even get the documents on these cases because allegedly these agencies are protecting the privacy of the families involved. Well, what has happened is it's made these agencies wholly unaccountable to the public for their actions. So this case, and this is a big one. I kind of want to show you how to move through it quickly, but this case is incredibly important. And I want to stress the goal here of this family, this biological family who is thriving, raising a beautiful, healthy little baby brother of Lincoln's.
They're adorable.
They have a home, they have employment, they have the support of extended family. They want their child back. Their child should have never been taken.
So just one last thing. I just think, and Julia said that was my first reaction when we met with Mary all those years ago. She's brilliant. Love her. Spike Cohen is extremely active covering and representing families in these horrible situations. He gets results. Do you know him, Mary?
Yes, I have actually read something about him. And there are a few across the country. Real Clear Investigations reached out and worked a little bit about some of what's happening in the schools. And there's people focusing on all the agencies where our government has control of kids, is becoming a really hot area in independent media because it needs to be.
Well, and think about it. If you weren't doing this in Oklahoma and hadn't started doing this all those years ago, where would we be?
Yeah.
Well,
nobody covers it.
No, they don't. They don't. I guess it's those who God puts it on their heart, and away you go.
Yeah. So you want me to throw this up for you?
Sure.
Are you ready?
Thank you. Perfect. Okay. Yes. So let me start by saying this is a really long piece. I wanted to tell their whole story, but on Substack, if you look over to the left, because a lot of times people don't have time to catch up, I always put subheadings in. And if you click on the subheadings, you can click to the different sections of this and the subheadings themselves. I always put them in there to give you the salient information where you can cruise through this in 5 minutes if that's what you've got. So I just wanted people to understand that is. Now, the articles, as far as investigative reporting, I want them to be forensic. I want there to be no excuses. I want a legislator to come in here and say, somebody's already done the work. Let's go. Let's go get the documents. Let's fix the governance mistakes. So let me go back to where I got involved in this. So I had a tip way back in March of 2024 that a Moore Public Schools 6th grade teacher had been arrested on a cruise ship. And we actually did a show about this and we talked about that. He was arrested. He and his same-sex spouse were taken off of that cruise ship and flown home by federal authorities related to the molestation of a child unrelated to the family. It was another family that got on the ship, and their child was allegedly molested by this. We'll call him man number one. That's Solon Harrison. And they came home. The FBI informed more public schools that they needed to remove him from the classroom. But to kind of keep it hush, they're still under an investigation, which I have a problem with that with federal authorities. I think every parent in the school whose children he had access to for 2 years should have been immediately notified. But that's the way it went down. So a couple of months later, he was indicted. He was indicted on a child sex crime for what happened on the cruise ship. 9 days later, he took his own life. This was a big charge. This charge was up to life and $250,000. He took his own life. In the middle of that reporting, I reported that this couple, these two men, had an adopted son. I did not know if that was a private adoption, if that was a surrogacy, if that came through DHS. So I reached out to DHS and asked them, were you involved with this child? Was he foster and adopted through your agency? Have you checked on this child given the allegations and the suicide? I got back a very similar response to what you got from the DA. Can't confirm or deny that we ever knew him. Privacy laws, right? And I mistakenly assumed. This went to Deborah Shropshire and the head of communications, and I got a response. I mistakenly assumed that they were for sure would check on the safety of that child in that home, right? Because you have two parents there. One now is credibly indicted on child sex abuse. Is the other one involved? What did the other one know? Is this going on in the home? So from there, I left it alone. Then I got another tip, right? I got another tip from an amazing reader, a parent in the Moore area, who found a clipping that showed a previous arrest. The same man who had been arrested was on the cruise ship, was arrested in 2010, long before he became a foster and adoptive parent, long before he became a school teacher, a certified school teacher. He was arrested. The charges included related to child sex abuse, 2 counts of sodomy on a minor, providing a minor alcohol. There are several other charges. These were serious charges, and it was in a local paper in rural Labette County in Kansas. So I immediately went to their archives, clipped that, and started requesting the documents, legal, open records of documents on that arrest. That county shut down. This is another layer of government that is hiding these things. I asked the sheriff open records request for that arrest. Immediately, that local paper took down all mention of him in their archives.
Wow.
So, right, process that. Different layers of government and media are protecting sort of this protected class by lifestyle. It's almost like we can't get to it.
They took it down.
They took it down. If I hadn't already screenshot it, it wouldn't be in the article. It was a screenshot that specifically said the arrest, the charges, the name, the age, everything. This is the county, his county of origin up in Kansas. So I pushed it. The sheriff pushed back. I kept pushing and saying, you're unlawfully withholding these records. Finally, I put in a complaint to the Kansas Attorney General. Nothing. Not willing to help get these records. So we're going at every level of government here. It's become a trend of protection for anybody in this certain class. And I am by no means saying all gay people molest children. That is absolutely not true. But I'm saying when there's a risk to child safety, it is staring us in the face. There's a federal indictment. Why would you shut down those records? So that's where I was at the time. So I put up another article basically saying, you know what? There's no way more public schools could have known, because they either expunged those records or the district attorney in that county in Kansas never prosecuted. We don't know. We don't have access to the open records. Okay. So after those published, and that's the actual right here, that's the actual screenshot from the Parsons Sun saying what that arrest was, along with all the other arrests.
My goodness. And then they pulled it?
They pulled it. They also pulled another record that was a little human interest story that had Solon Harrison, this man now twice arrested for child sex crimes, and his now spouse. And it was about a church youth event for Thanksgiving in the area. And they also pulled that down. So there's no mention of this man any longer in the Labette County Parsons Sun, period. He has been erased. And this is, then I do have a tip that I cannot confirm, and I'll say it over and over again. I don't have the record, so I can't confirm. Ryan, who was McGonigal, who is now Ryan Harrison, who married Solon Harrison, is reported but not confirmed to have been the victim in that 2010 arrest.
Oh, wow.
At 16 years of age. I cannot confirm that. And Solon Harrison was significantly older than he was. So that is an absolute crime. After that 2010 arrest, Solon Harrison very briefly married a woman in Oklahoma. And I reached out to her. That lasted a very short time. I reached out to her to try and get her to talk to me, and she was not willing. But then he turned right around and married Ryan, who is now Harrison. Okay. Ryan Harrison, since this suicide, is the sole adoptive parent of Lincoln. They have had him since the day after his birth in December of 2020, and he is now 4 years old.
Okay, can we stop just 1 second, because we've got a couple of comments here that I don't want to let us get past too far.
Okay.
I think you know Susan Little, don't you?
I have heard of Susan Little. Yeah.
Okay. If anyone is wondering, we're working to get Gardenia an attorney. I work for attorney Stephen Crow. So did Gardenia. He may take the case. So that's good. And then Gabe's asked if you've reached out to the new head of Oklahoma DHS, Jeff Cartmel, about this.
Oh, that's a really good question, Gabe. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my contacts with DHS. Since the Lockmans, Gardenia and her husband, Andrew, have contacted me. We've had extensive, let's just move to that. Okay. Let's move to that. So Ryan Harrison, after the passing of his husband, in what we believe is November, moved himself and the child to Kansas. We do not know if DHS ever checked in with him after the charges or after his husband's suicide, but this is a GoFundMe that he set up after the death, asking for funds. And in it, he talks about specific needs that are concerning. He talks about his mental health needs and how he needs to get treatment. He talks about his financial needs and how he is strapped financially. He talks about needing to get out of the state and relocate out of the state in this GoFundMe. And there's a link there. It's still up, or it was. And this picture that he used, I didn't catch this on the first go around. It was actually Lincoln's mom that pointed this out to me recently. In the background of that picture, there's a sign that identifies that they took this picture at a stop while they were on the Carnival cruise, where the man on the left was later indicted for molesting a child. So Lincoln was with them on that cruise. So obviously, once I met the Lockmans,
can you? I don't know if I'm having trouble following this because I'm just so horrified that my brain is not functioning.
It's okay.
This couple. And you're going to tell us how they ended up with this child. But the point of the matter is that the man on the left in the blue shirt on this cruise, on this same cruise where this picture was taken, was accused of molesting a child, and it was after this cruise that he killed himself.
Correct.
Oh
He was not just accused, he was indicted in federal court for molesting a child. The family.
What's the timeline of that, Mary? From like when it first happened in Kansas to the indictment to the cruise. What's the timeline there?
The cruise was during spring break of 2024, so it was mid-March. He was not indicted. They weren't done with the investigation. He wasn't indicted until June of 2024. Now, Moore Public Schools had him step down immediately. They were contacted after he was arrested in March and had him suspended. He was suspended with pay until, well, obviously his suicide, but he was indicted in June. 9 days later, he committed suicide. The day after his suicide, he was on the agenda with the State Board of Education for his license to be suspended, his teaching license to be suspended.
Wow.
So that was the timeline there. But then after, this GoFundMe comes up using a picture from the very cruise where this abuse, the indictment came from.
Or even.
Okay? And there are a lot of, just the GoFundMe says that this person on the right himself is in a shaky position to be able to care for a child as far as mental health and finances, and talking about getting out of the state. So we do know that he relocated out of the state. So then both the Lockmans and myself, since now I'm learning that DHS never checked on this child. We don't know about this child's safety. So both myself and the Lockmans, in accordance with state law, we are all mandated reporters. Now there's a child that we suspect is at risk of abuse. We both made referrals to the Oklahoma Child Abuse Hotline. Those referrals were screened out. When I pestered about why they were screened out, what was going on, and called back, I was informed that the family had moved to Kansas and that Kansas was now investigating it. So, and this is actually the remaining adoptive parent and Lincoln sometime in October of 2024. But what the hotline told me in reference to my referral was not true. I immediately called the Kansas hotline, similar hotline for abuse. They could find no record of Lincoln under either his biological or his adoptive name or his birth date. So Oklahoma had not made that connection.
Wow.
Which is scary. So immediately I made a referral to Kansas. And in all of these referrals, I'm providing all of the information that I have. I followed up with emails to a hotline supervisor in Oklahoma with everything that I had, where I thought that they were, all kinds of information about that. And I immediately got back from, well, not immediately. I had to kind of go back and forth with Kansas for a couple of weeks after I made the referral. And they sent back this response, which is basically telling me, we're not investigating this, but it's very nebulous. It could be for any of these 4 reasons in the box. And we're not even going to tell you which reason it is that we're not going to investigate this. So they have come to the point in child welfare now nationally in these states where they don't think they have to answer to anybody about their reasons for decision making. So
let me throw this up from Gabe. Gabe says, I'm supposed to have a meeting with Jeff Cartmel sometime during the interim. Can you send me this information?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Representative Woolley. You are doing an amazing job being an advocate for kids in the legislature. I will send that. Yes, I will send you everything I've got. So Kansas now is playing duck and cover again for not even willing to go check on this child to see if this child is safe, healthy, okay. Moving on, I want to get into how Lincoln ended up in this extremely unaccountable system. So the Lockmans have been amazing. Every government agency has shrouded everything and not given any information. The Lockmans have been so incredibly open for me. Gardenia from the beginning said, like many Oklahomans, we have such a problem with substance abuse here, and we have such a culture that draws people into it. She very much admitted that she was addicted when she became pregnant with Lincoln. She was worried about his health. She wanted a healthy baby. She was referred to, she sought on her own treatment and was referred to the STAR Clinic. So the STAR Clinic is a taxpayer-funded program out of OU Medical that specifically works with pregnant moms with a history of substance abuse. The entire goal of the program is to keep these families intact, to bring in healthy babies into the world, to support the moms, to get those babies home with their families. Gardenia was doing extremely well in this program for months. She was drug-free. They had a plan in place. She was going to have her baby at OU Medical, and that baby was going to go home with supports from the STAR program. Well, this was during December of 2020. Do you remember December of 2020, all of 2020? It was COVID nightmare with hospitals. So mom's water breaks and she goes into labor, and she calls OU Medical, not the STAR Clinic, because that's just a 9-to-5 kind of thing. She calls OU Medical and they tell her, nope, no birthing suites here. Everything's full, can't possibly. You're going to have to go to a hospital near you. Later on, she learned from the STAR Clinic, they should never have said that. She should have come to OU Medical, had that baby there, and that plan would have rolled on just as they had it. Lincoln would have been home with them. She went to Norman Regional, and she was incredibly honest with them. She told them she was being treated by the STAR program. She told them she was now drug-free. This woman, I didn't even have to ask. She gave me her login information for Norman Regional and allowed me to comb through all of her medical records. Everything she told me.
So how sad is it that the victim in this is more transparent than the government?
Exactly. It tells you so much about who's telling the truth and who's hiding their decision making.
Good night.
So she tested all of her urine tests at the hospital. She tested negative for every single supplement. She wasn't taking anything but a prenatal vitamin. It's in her records. Lincoln arrived into the world. So before I go on, just to tell you a little more so you understand how important the STAR program is, it's funded through the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. That's an embattled agency right now that has $30 million missing dollars. So there's some problems there that you should be aware of. But they are mandated. The STAR program is supposed to work with DHS to keep these kids in their biological families and provide the support they need to thrive. They have a huge success record with this. This is their 85% of infants were discharged. This was a mom that was being very successful in the program. So I want people to keep that in mind. So this is Gardenia. Her last name was Sarver then. It's now Lockman, married to Lincoln's father. All of her testing was negative. This is straight from her records. There was nothing in her system. She was telling the truth. This is exactly from her records where she said, yes, I was using this drug in the past, but I was referred to this place and it was getting this specialized treatment from the specialists at OU. So she told them everything. The hospital knew. Lincoln was born healthy as can be, typical labor, on time, precious as can be. That's Gardenia on the left, and that's Andrew, his father, on the right. And
look at that blonde hair. Holy cow.
I know. Isn't he cute? He has Gardenia's face. And, they had a few hours of just relishing being a family. They had all of the equipment and car seat and everything ready. The notes from the hospital said they were experiencing skin-to-skin bonding. He was successfully breastfeeding. There were no alarms here. Nothing going off to say this baby won't be safe. Nevertheless, a CPS worker named Jessica, who we do not know her last name, from the Cleveland County offices, showed up just 13 hours after his birth and said she was going to a judge and she was going to take this child away. The Lockmans made their case. They said, we're with the STAR Clinic. We tested negative. Gardenia's quote to me was, the Star Clinic would have had him deliver and sent him home with us, and that they had proof of nothing. She says they had proof of nothing, yet this worker was determined to take this child. The following day, they showed up and did just that. They got a judge's order for emergency custody. They took Lincoln away from the Lockmans, and they gave him directly in foster care to Solon and Ryan Harrison. Even though they knew she wasn't using drugs, she had the support that we as taxpayers paid to give her. I think we're all in agreement that that is a fantastic program to have in place. And I am not a fan of government. And it was working, but they did it anyway. So they were just devastated. Later on, the same worker told them that even Lincoln's umbilical cord, which provides a much longer history of drug use, came up completely drug-free. Still, they did not give this child back to parents.
Wow.
Okay. They used an excuse. You know, DHS has a lot of tools in its arsenal to be able to overreach. Who was the judge? I'm going to talk about that, Julie. I see that comment right there. We need to talk about that. They started, because drugs were not the issue, they started to dig into their housing situation, and they were in transition where they were moving from one place, and they had a temporary place for 2 weeks, which was just fine. There was no safety issue there. And they moved to a house in Yukon. And then they had this apartment for 6 or 7 months. There was no housing issue, yet DHS was still using that as part of the basis for taking and keeping their child. Okay, do we want to stop? I know this is a lot to process, and people probably have a lot of questions.
Well, I mean, they are very vocal today. And, you know, Mandy Fisher-Reed has had her own run-ins in her family with DHS. And she said there's federal funding that sponsors this. The children of Oklahoma are revenue to the state. They target people who cannot fight back. And unless you can pay an attorney upwards of $100,000, you have no chance. And then just, you know, sad people just talking about, and Susan makes a comment. I can call Joe Dorman, the head of OCA, and see if he'll launch an investigation.
Yes. And already a couple of different legislators have been in touch with me and are requesting the case records from this case from DHS. Also requesting, Representative Justin Humphrey is requesting those records. He's also requesting the adoptive and foster applications and vetting documentation for this couple to say, we live in this world of AI, and journalists know it can be a really useful tool to give you tips about which rabbit holes to go down, where to dig. So if someone else can find this previous record, this previous arrest on this person, why can't an agency be required to do more than just background checks and approving someone to take someone else's child?
But I've said that about ethics reports too.
Yeah.
If I can find out that stuff online, why isn't there somebody in the ethics department that's looking this stuff up? And I wanted to throw this up. When my neighbor's child went missing, I was the one who called 911 after she was recovered and safe. DHS called me and tried to get me to accuse the parents over the phone. Y'all know what I did.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. And, I'm not going to say this is just DHS, but this is the thing about government and humans. When humans get power, the majority of them misuse it. And DHS has a lot of power over people's families.
Well, and Susan said, as a paralegal, I can confidently state that DHS failed so many children that I almost quit the legal field. Every time we try to sue them, they claim exemptions. It's so frustrating. And I do think that that's a problem, because I know, sorry, I had to stop on that one. Joe Dorman with Child Advocacy, the same guy is pushing for DHS coming into homeschool parents' homes. And that is true. He's suddenly gotten behind that. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Robert can come on and talk about that. It's very bad. Yeah, we have so many comments. I don't know that I can catch up. So go ahead. Let's keep going here.
Let's move on to this next section. So DHS has mandates that all foster families have to understand that the goal of each case, unless there's some hugely extending circumstances, is to reunify that child with the biological family. Foster parents must support that case goal. That did not happen in this case. This baby went to these two men. They didn't want the biological family to know anything about them. They would not meet with them. They would not supervise the court-ordered visitations. So the permanency worker had to come and do all of those. And the Oklahomans were not even told who had their child as far as just the makeup of the family. They were not told for 6 months that their child was placed with two men. Now, DHS is supposed to respect the biological family's cultural and religious beliefs and identifications. That this really crosses a line because, as Gardenia said later on when she found out, yes, I have a religious objection to this placement. Her objections were ignored, which is really interesting. So she didn't know anything. She and Andrew didn't know anything about who had their child until Lincoln got it to be about 6 months. And he started to babble and talk. And she talked to the permanency worker and said, I really don't want my baby. I mean, they were fighting every step of the way, seeing this child every minute that they would be allowed, providing all kinds of things for this child. She said, I don't want this child calling a caregiver mama. And that's when the DHS worker said, you know what? I can't stick with this where they don't know anything about these people. She said, that's not going to happen because he's with two men.
Well, and Sherry says it sounds like there were some in the agency just waiting for a baby to give that couple.
Yes, that is actually the belief of everyone involved who's not with DHS now, including the parents and the worker. I just want you to see a picture of what this family looked like during visitations with their child. This is not an aloof family. This family was completely engaged. They never missed a visit. Andrew talked about this being such a turning point where he wanted to be the best dad that he could be. So they were doing all the right things within this case that should have never happened. They were doing all of the right things. So they learned that he was with the Harrisons. They made religious objections. Nothing happened. But at that point, their worker, and I want to say something about their worker. I want to talk quite a bit about her. She's a permanency worker named Akitha Washington, who the Oklahomans describe as the only person they trusted in this process. She saw everything with reality from the beginning, and she fought for them every step of the way. So she then arranged for the Harrisons to have to meet the Oklahomans at the zoo at this DHS event at the zoo for basically foster siblings. If kids are placed apart, it brings them together. But they actually got to be around them this one time. And while they were walking around, the Harrisons started talking about making plans to go again to the sip and stroll pride night that they have at the zoo, which is, adults only, alcohol, LGBT event. And the Oklahomans left with even greater anxiety about Lincoln's safety, just really feeling crushed by the system and having no control of what was going on with their child. So Akitha Washington, she was their permanency worker. She actually, on Christmas Day, when their child was 10 days old, she went and got him and sat at a Waffle House with this couple for 4 hours so they could bond with their newborn son. This is an exceptional human. My interview with her was tearful. She says this was one of two cases that drove her out of this work that she was so good at, advocating for families after over a dozen years. She lives out of the state now, but she was willing to talk to me about what went on. And she gave a lot of insight about how the court is complicit in these overreaches. And what she said was, from the very beginning, she believes someone wanted to give the Harrisons a baby.
Well, what's the vetting process? Who's the ultimate say so, and who gets to do what over there, Mary? Do we know?
Well, it's interesting. DHS, like all state agencies, has all these layers of hierarchy, right? You have your CPS workers, your child protective workers, they go out and investigate the reports. And then the cases are handed over to a permanency worker. So CPS really makes the decisions about who comes into custody, right? Then they work with a permanency worker. They're assigned with someone who's supposed to help correct whatever the conditions that made the kid unsafe and get them back into the home. That person has a supervisor. Then there's someone above that at the county level. And from everything I could find, the man who was 2 above this permanency worker who was running the county at the time, and I'll come back to this because I want to show you this man. This man's name is David Johnson. The permanency worker from day one said after she visited the Harrison's home, she advocated for Lincoln to be removed from that home. She said they were not observably not nurturing, and they were observably not capable of taking care of an infant of that age. She conveyed that there were things like trying to feed a newborn baby food, which anybody who's ever had a newborn knows you cannot do that. At a parental visit with the parents, Gardenia was changing her son's diaper, and both she and the worker discovered that he had a horrific diaper rash. They called the Harrisons, and the Harrisons said, it's nothing. And this permanency worker said, it most definitely is something. You will take him to the doctor today and you will provide a report. So there was this back and forth where she was going to her supervisor, and she said, sometimes tearfully, saying this kid, number one, she couldn't understand why he was even in custody. She had to go looking for records to find out that mom tested negative for drugs. She knew the family now. They had housing. She was advocating for this child to go back to the family, and she was advocating for him to get out of this house. She didn't feel like it was a safe place, and she had good observable reasons for that. She said every time she said something, this man, David Johnson, 2 up from her supervisor, would side with the Harrisons.
Wow.
So there was this battle going on. This man has since been promoted to the DHS state office. He's now in charge of all post-adoption placement services. So that's the way it works in the bureaucracy. But she said higher ups, and I mean higher than my supervisor and myself, were completely enamored with them. If I said something, they were sided with. And I specifically asked her, I said, would it be accurate to say that during this time, the same-sex placements were trendy with DHS? And she said, yes, they were. She believes that there was this progressive policy trend that absolutely subverts state law about child safety. It doesn't matter who you're talking about. Those protections should stay in place. And she said, in my opinion, what went down is DHS wanted Harrisons to have a baby. There was no real concern for biological parents. The Harrisons wanted a baby, and this was their way to get it, and the department was fully aware.
So I'm curious, there's a comment, because I was thinking that very same thing until Becca said this. Is that David Johnson part of an LGBT group?
I don't know. I was told that he's married to a woman. I don't know about his lifestyle choices or his politics.
Might be interesting, just saying.
It might be interesting. So next, this worker who she's a whistleblower. She's the one we need to be testifying about what's going on in DHS. She then outlined for me one of the most concerning parts of this case. So Judicial District 21, that's down in Cleveland County. For a long time, the man sitting on the bench with juvenile deprived court, that's where they handle all of the DHS cases, was a man named Stephen Bonner. He was there for decades. And he was very much known as a very fair person. If the parents were the problem, he was going to call it out. If DHS was the problem, he was going to call it out. He retired and was replaced in November of 2020, weeks before Lincoln's birth, with another judge, with this woman, okay? So this woman's name is Bethany Stanley, and she was appointed to the bench just like 3 weeks before Lincoln's birth by Governor Stitt. when Bonner retired. So there was a very big shift in the court when you're talking about someone who was the cornerstone of juvenile deprived court in Cleveland County for so many years. So I think that's important. But what Miss Washington, who was the permanency worker, shared with me is that the other thing about this case is that it kept continuing. They kept changing the court date for adjudication. And this was the court dragging out this case. So I want to just take a second to talk about Title 10A. Title 10A is the state statute that covers all of child welfare. It's where all of the checks and balances are in place that say the government can only reach in when a kid is unsafe, and this is the procedure they must follow. So law enforcement can go out on something and they can take a kid into emergency custody, and then they can transfer to DHS, and then the process starts from there. It's still a court process. But for DHS to take a kid into custody, here's what needs to happen. Here's how it's supposed to go down. The DA has to request an emergency court order from a district judge to place them into what's called temporary emergency custody. This is, we're just going to keep this kid safe until they can get in front of the court with evidence and tell us what's going on. Within 7 days, the DA has to file a petition for a deprived child proceeding. The filing can only be delayed under certain circumstances with the court's permission for a period not to exceed 15 calendar days. So you can see how the law is trying to limit the time that the government can grab and keep your child without proving itself, okay? Then OKDHS has to give a report to that DA within 30 days with the evidence about why removal was necessary, and then an adjudication hearing. So policy for DHS is that adjudication happens within 30 days. That didn't happen. The law says it's got to be held not more than 90 days from the filing of that petition that comes in after 7 days of them taking the child. So think about where we are. We're just past 3 months. That did not happen. Adjudication is where everybody comes to court. The parents and the family have a say. DHS has to prove that they made the right call to the court. And then the court can place the child into state custody and make them a ward of the court. Adjudication didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I've never seen this. If it doesn't happen, the law says within 90 days, quote, the child shall be released from emergency custody. That didn't happen. Unless the court issues a written order with facts showing that the child would be in imminent danger, they did not, or grants a continuance of the emergency custody. But there has to be a massive exceptional circumstance, and all parties, include the parents, have to agree for adjudication to be put off. That did not happen. So this is a huge problem. Then the law says, and here's the kicker, this is where it really went south for the Oklahomans and the system doubled down. The law says if they don't do it within 180 days, 6 months, that child is no longer in custody. So that's the check and balance in the court. So what happened then is this incredible permanency worker was informing the Oklahomans of their rights all the way along. She was super concerned that they would not adjudicate the case outside of the law. And she gave the Oklahomans that information. She whipped out her laptop. She said, printed out the law and policy, gave it to the Oklahomans at a supervised visit and said, technically, your kid is not in custody anymore, which started a chain of events. They said, we don't want to give him back. And DHS and the higher ups and the Harrisons got law enforcement involved. It was Moore Police Department where the Harrisons were living. And there was a bit of a showdown that happened. Somehow that showdown ended with DHS and law enforcement talking offline, and another emergency custody order was issued by this court. What the permanency worker said, and I quote, it was shady as crap that they kept this child. So they've proved nothing 6 months out. They have no standing, and this kid is still in custody. Well, and this is the law. If anyone wants to go to the report, this is the law and what the law says about this, printed, you can link to it. What happened then is, for asserting their rights in the law, the system completely turned on the Lockmans. They were punished for that. Their visitation, first of all, so Miss Washington, she left DHS over them doing this. They were assigned a new permanency worker who Washington describes as very compliant with supervision, with supervisors there at DHS. The parents' court-ordered visitation was reduced from 2 hours a week to a half hour a week. They were being shut out. They were being bullied by this process to fight back for their child. So 9 months into the case, they made them start from the beginning on their entire plan. And of course, you can imagine that the parents, who had both struggled with addiction, were devastated. They were crushed. They felt powerless. At one particular hearing that finally took place in Cleveland County, the judge took Gardenia, the mother, into custody over some minor fines from Jackson County. And she was taken to jail, and she spent time in jail and placed on a high bond that she couldn't make. And she spent time in jail over this. That is retribution coming from the court. And it's unconscionable. So, and that is when both Gardenia and Andrew said they were so devastated that they both started using substances again. And if you know anything about meth addiction, one of the hardest things to get off, and this, she had been clean since early on in her pregnancy. So meth is a heinous drug. The brain does not even start to heal from meth addiction for 18 months. They know they have these parents in a very vulnerable place, and they played on it and they pressured them. So the time came where they immediately, after their arrest related to, it wasn't a violent arrest, it was related to possession of stolen property associated again with a return to drug addiction, they immediately filed to terminate the Lockmans' rights after everything they put them through. And they were informed that if they didn't, they would never be able to keep a child in Oklahoma again. Under that pressure and in those circumstances, they relinquished their rights, something they did not want to do.
So Sherry says, according to this law, after 180 days, the child is now kidnapped, not in custody, but kidnapped.
I could see that definition fit. I can definitely see that definition fit. It's really hard to take in what's happened in this case, how if you look back at, if any form or level of government had done their job at any stop here, we would not be in this situation. No. We would not have this child separated from his family. We would not be saying, please go find this child and check on him. Do you know what both hotlines asked me when I called and outlined the risk of harm to this child who's been in a household with someone we now know is an indicted child molester? They both asked, well, the abuse, right? The abuse wasn't related to he was arrested for, wasn't related to this adopted child, right? That's the question I got. As if pedophilia is situational. As if it's okay, he can be a teacher, he just can't go on a cruise. Or it's okay, he can be an adopted father, you just can't leave him alone with somebody else's kid. And I want to reiterate, they screened out legitimate reports of child being at risk of harm, and they refused to look for him. Okay, so I wanted to keep this all together in the article because I wanted you to see what a miracle this family is. So the Lockmans now are married. They're both have been sober since 2022, June of 2022. Andrew's in the heating and air business. He's found steady employment. They have their own home, and they now have a beautiful baby boy. He's much bigger than this now. He's just precious, named Lane. They named their child Lane Carter Lockman. Lincoln's name was named Lincoln Carter Lockman because they want Lincoln to know who his family is when that time comes. This family's thriving. Gardenia is back trying to get a business certification. She's in school. They have the support of family. And if you look at the picture of the two families here, the DHS picked these two men. Now one has taken a kid across state lines. He is possibly the victim of his spouse back when he was a minor. 2 arrests for his spouse for child sexual abuse, a suicide. That's where we are with this family. And now look at, if DHS had respected its boundaries, where would this child be? Sorry for the moment of silence.
I mean, we've got a bunch of comments and things we need to go back to, but
it's literally unbelievable. I mean, you can't even make it up. I mean, you can't even make something like this up.
No, you can't.
And I don't know how. I mean, because my brain has been going the entire time you've been doing this, to the point where I couldn't even process things. They wanted this gay couple to have this child.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see. I don't. How do you come to any other conclusion? Because it's clear that this couple, the baby's natural parents, are not, they're doing everything they can to make this work and to be a good family. I mean, what a sweet, precious little family. I just can't, I don't get how you get any other way.
No, it's really hard from the evidence provided to draw any other conclusion, and particularly the honesty of this permanency worker, of this family, the openness and the concern for this family, and saying, absolutely, this permanency worker hit every brick wall trying to bring up safety concerns. Is that what's going on throughout the entire DHS system? Are the good people being driven out? And how unsafe does that make the thousands of kids in DHS custody? They have prioritized and worked with the courts, as the courts have come to disregard law and prioritize progressive ideals over law. We see this in every part of the judicial system.
Yes, I just feel like the judicial system is absolutely, it's ruined. And Governor Stitt has, and we don't even talk about the fact that DAs, county DAs, they're not even being elected anymore because Governor Stitt just appoints them.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up Governor Stitt, because I'm going to tell you, Governor Stitt last year made a big deal about OKDHS coming off of the supervised plan associated with a class action suit from years ago. So if you go way back, you'll remember DHS was sued in a class action suit related to primarily abuse of kids within the system. What came out of the settlement was something called the Pinnacle Plan. The Pinnacle Plan was a multi-point plan, and these outsiders called the co-neutrals for years were monitoring the Pinnacle Plan to try and get DHS to get its act together and keep kids safe, right? Governor Stitt last year made a big deal about, we're finally releasing OKDHS from the Pinnacle Plan because kids are so safe within the system. What I think has happened is, over the last 10 years, the people with power have moved progressively toward an ideology that no longer sees what's happening here as a risk of harm. And I'm going to tell you, when I talked to 2 different hotlines for 2 different states about child abuse, and they ask me, well, I know he did this to somebody else, but it's not related to this kid, Lincoln, right? I feel like they're starting to normalize sexual abuse, child sexual abuse.
Yes.
And that scares me.
Well, who's the check and balance on DHS? Is it the AG? Is it the DAs? Is it just the court system in general? I mean, where does the accountability come in?
Well, the law would say it's the DA first, because the DA, no child comes into even emergency custody at first without a DA filing that with the court. But then it says that the court is the huge check and balance over DHS. If DHS is overreaching, so after adjudication, which didn't happen in this case until well after the 180 days, I mean, it just didn't happen. DHS is supposed to be checking in with a permanency hearing every 90 days, telling the court how the child's doing, how they're supposed to be visiting every month with the child in their placement, giving a full report of what's going on there. They're supposed to check in about what the family, biological family, is doing and how close they're getting to reunification. Imagine now we're at the point none of that happened. None of that happened. And the court is complicit because they kept putting off adjudication.
So I'm going to go back, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to we have so many comments. So Gracie said, we adopted our own grandchild. They put us through a very intense background check along with fingerprinting. There's no way this was just a slip up.
So let me say this. That is an excellent comment. And this is a misconception that people need to understand. If you think your child's safe with their teacher because they've gone through a Department of Ed background check and fingerprints, think again. If you think an adopted or foster child is safe because those foster parents have been fingerprinted and background checked, think again. If DAs are not prosecuting these crimes, just like in this case in Kansas back in 2010, nope, arrested, charged, they decided to throw it out for whatever reason that we don't get to know. That will never show up on the record. So that's there. I've also seen in Oklahoma, I can verify that I documented and wrote a story about a case where a same-sex couple, 2 men, Washington County up in Bartlesville, the judge expunged a sex crime to allow them to adopt. So they are expunging child sex crimes. The OSBI has to check off on that. So they are the check and balance, and it is happening regularly.
Well, it was also in that same county that they gave a baby to a same-sex couple, also in Blackwell, wasn't it?
Yes. So up in Bartlesville, they gave DHS.
Bartlesville, sorry.
DHS gave, his name was Xander Bruntmeyer, and they gave.
And he died.
He died of abuse by one of these women. And DHS essentially covered it up at first. Tried to cover it up at first. And when it came out in the murder trial, they had to go back and relook at cases in that home as fosters where they had broken a child's arm before, and DHS wrote it off and went ahead and placed that newborn baby in there. So there is a protected class that is being encouraged. Yes. I don't mean to belabor this, but at pride events across our state, there are booths encouraging couples that attend the pride events to become foster parents.
Well, and I've heard people say this to me. I've gotten into arguments with people before about, wouldn't you rather have a baby have a safe home with a gay couple and instead of a heterosexual couple who's going to beat them? Well, I mean, to me, that's kind of a non sequitur almost, because homosexual couples have a relationship based solely on sex. And you can't have a family as a homosexual couple. And I like I've said, I'm a libertarian, essentially. You do you, I don't care. I'm certainly not going to condemn you for being homosexual. I don't care. But the point of the matter is if that is your lifestyle, it is based solely on sex, because you cannot have a child biologically. So if that's the case, why are we holding up this segment of our population as somehow just a fine place for children to go? And Catholic Charities started that a long time ago too, trending toward having children adopted to same-sex couples because there weren't enough, according to them, heterosexual couples coming forward for adoption. I would like to say that that sounds to me like a whole load of crap. But let me go back to this.
I do want to, before you go on to that,
okay.
I just wanted, you made a comment about the family environment, and I want to go back to what the permanency worker said.
Yeah.
And she said that the Harrisons were observably not capable of providing age-appropriate care and seemed to lack the ability to nurture. Her quote was, "There was no coddling, holding, or talking to the baby. There was not a family feeling in the home, even between the two men." So I thought that was just very telling to me. And so let's just say in this world that, hey, we all agree, which you're never going to get the people of Oklahoma to agree, that same-sex fostering and adoption is something that they're going to get behind, right? But let's say that we do. My big concern is, for this protected class of people, I think they're setting aside their own policies and safety standards when they step into those foster homes. And I think those standards should never be set aside. I don't care if it's two dads, two moms, a husband and a wife, if it's people who fostered before. I think every time you go in, if you're going to reach into somebody's family and take their children, you better make sure they're safe.
Well, my goodness, at least give them a better home than they had before. That's absolutely not happening in this case under any set of conditions.
None. Under none.
So Jana with Constitutional Home Educators Alliance wanted everybody to know that, they're having a home expo at Randall University this weekend, Homeschool Expo, and they're actually going to talk about the fact that OICA, who Joe Dorman, we just talked about that, they're interested in going into homeschooling, specifically going into homeschooling families to check on their children for safety reasons, because homeschoolers are out of the so-called public eye because their kids don't go to a public school where somebody could report on them, which is interesting because how many times have you've been on this program and we've talked about the fact that people in public school aren't reporting the child abuse in public school.
Exactly.
You mean government control school, Jenny?
Yes.
Government school.
Yep. Exactly.
Under until DHS is held accountable for their wrongdoings, change will never happen. I mean, the show that finds child predators found one in Oklahoma that was a supervisor for CPS. So the show that finds child predators found one in Oklahoma that was a supervisor for CPS. And then Julie asks Cindy Rowe, are you aware of this? You need to step up as a legislator, correct this. And I do think we've got a lot of questions about, Susan says, I can get the policies and procedures when it comes to placement. Lisa says, is anybody else crying? Targets are low income parents, children under 5 easily erase memories of the BIOS, and no support that can come in and create havoc. They'll never take the kinds of people who are loud, that create public awareness. I took a DHS employee to speak with Jake Merrick, and she told him that she was giving a child back to the mom who had no support. But her supervisor told her, if you'll sign the baby over to this lady to adopt, then they'll be promoted. So it's clear that what's going on. This is the real Handmaid's Tale. The baby never should have been taken.
Correct.
I think Jessica was definitely related to our friends. I'm not sure about that.
Or friends with that. So and it does bring into account. I asked the worker, were there a lot of LGBT sympathetic people higher up? And she said, yes, there were.
Yeah.
She said not everyone, but disproportionately so. So when we get people who are then this protected class that is promoted and selected for promotion and get more power within these agencies or within our courts, that's where we start to see the devastation of this really start to roll.
Well, and then that person says, I don't know who M is, as a former DHS intake worker, former foster parent as well as adoptive parent, I can say Judge Bonner was a fair judge. So DHS breaks the law, probably daily steals children and gets away with it. They need to be done away with. And so many people have said that's trafficking, because how is it not trafficking?
Yeah.
Catherine says that's why people are scared to have kids. Between this and fighting vaccines, it's an absolute battle. Is the child's attorney involved? Is CASA involved? Did the biological parents file grievances?
So, as someone just said, the parents are working with an attorney, because that's, I want to be really clear. The parents, and I think everyone listening, want this mistake corrected. The government does not correct their mistakes, and that's what's happening.
Correct.
These people want their child back, and they are observably completely capable of raising this child. So the action here, as we do have some legislators that are asking for records with this, thank you, Representative Humphreys, for jumping in. I so appreciate, he's always bold. But I think public pressure is the key. They duck and cover and they protect each other, these entities, government entities. So at the end of the article, if you go to v1sut.com and go to the article, like myself, I made a referral. I knew that this child was at risk of harm. So did the Lockmans. That's what we're required under the law. And I made a referral. This is the Kansas Child Abuse Hotline. And you can make a referral. The information about the Lockmans, about Lincoln, about his date of birth are right there. Also, I made one to the Oklahoma hotline. And look, all children deserve great childhoods. Call the hotline. I think we should all take our responsibility to be mandated reporters seriously. And I think we should bombard them with reports saying it doesn't matter if the abuse comes from within or without. This meets the parameters of a needed investigation. So there are P1s, priority 1s, and priority 2s. Within child welfare in Oklahoma. That means priority 1, you're out there within 24 hours checking on this child. It meets those parameters. They're screening this out completely, and this should be a P1 investigation.
So Lisa said, and you got to where so many people were going. Tell us how we can help. Is there a petition, a rally, storming the Capitol? What can we do? This child is not Native American, right?
Gardenia, you could speak to that. I don't think we talked about that. Will you let us know? Are you or Andrew part of any of the Native tribes in Oklahoma? If you would just comment about that.
How could people do this to their family? These people are so traumatized by what the system does to them. It's unfathomable. This happens to literally hundreds of children in Oklahoma. And Julia says 180 days. How about a minute? And then, how can we help? Is there a GoFundMe? So hopefully Gardenia will chime in here. After all the legalese and headlines, parental failures, court failures, system failures, what is best for the child? All this set aside, what provides the most safety and well-being for the child? I don't think that's where they're going, Copper Claus. So the adopters got all kinds of concessions for their abuse, but the parents didn't get any sort of justice whatsoever.
Agreed.
Spread the word, tell everyone. Lisa says if those men weren't gay, they never would have enjoyed that level of protected status. This is an interesting comment. I wonder if federal funding increased based on DEI adoptions. That's something that should be looked into. Doug says that his conclusion is that kid was trafficked. It just, Lincoln's parents did everything right according to DHS. Imagine how many families couldn't make those changes and have had their children stolen.
Yes.
I've watched a judge order the return of children and DHS go over there 2 hours later and remove them again.
Wow. Wow.
The issue is that all judges take the word of any and all DHS employees. I've been witness to many DHS employees perjuring themselves in court. These judges give them too much credit. DHS has become so filled with an alternative agenda, it's destroying families. To Mary's point, a friend of mine was supervisor at DHS and also ultimately quit years ago because she couldn't get the slug workers fired. It's just natural for slugs and bullies to find work in government, which true. So what can we do? This is not my story, yet it leaves me feeling powerless and enraged. DAs seem to have problems indicting government over individuals. Mm-hmm. They never filed porn charges on any schools, which dovetails into the depraved thinking behind it. It's so true. I mean, our courts, guardianships require 4 checks through multiple government agencies, then reviewed and signed off by a judge. The same should apply to adoption. Become a volunteer for CASA or PARB. PARB? Do you know?
No, I actually have to look it up now.
And then Gardenia says that then all this comes out. We knew something was wrong from day one. Safe and gay versus abusive and straight is the biggest flaw of logic ever. Safety status is completely unrelated to sexual orientation. Well, I don't know that I agree with that necessarily, because again, I go back to what a homosexual relationship is. I mean, at least with a heterosexual relationship, you have a family. It's not just solely based on sex. That's not a homosexual relationship. So I don't share that particular perspective. But I mean,
no, but I do. I get that. And Lisa sort of hit on what I said before.
No maternal instincts.
Yeah.
From what she said, I think we can all live in this same space and agree to, I don't care who you are. DHS cannot lower its safety standards. Yeah. And when a worker sees something's not safe in a home, they need to take action, no matter who that is. Absolutely. So the what can they do? I love your viewers because they're so smart. The what we can do, the Attorney General, Gentner Drummond, has been asked to start an investigation into DHS. Yeah, I was going to say that too. I just looked that up. And that's a great idea. He's been asked. So Senator Shane Jett and Representative Humphreys, they've put together panels for the legislature. They've done the grand jury approach, asking for grand juries. There was even findings in that obviously this needed to be looked into, but our Attorney General said that he wasn't going to open an investigation into what's going on here, these kind of practices. So if you feel led to speak out to, whether it's on social media, an email, anything that you can to our Attorney General and demand an investigation as to where Lincoln Lockman is and what's happening. Also, legislative oversight. Your state representatives and senators, and there are committees that absolutely are responsible for the oversight of DHS. And we need to have those people involved. They should be demanding the records from this case. PARB, yes, Post-Adjudication Review Board. Now that you say it, I am familiar with that. This is a panel in your local area that looks at cases and reviews them to say what happened here, was that appropriate? I think that's great. Someone said a GoFundMe for the Lockmans to be able to fight that. I think that's a fantastic idea. And then lastly, someone brought up federal funds here. And I've written extensively about how federal funds, the federal government is giving our health department, our mental health department, and all these programs as much, if not more money than our state is. And with that comes ties to these priorities. I feel like the children of our state would be safer if we didn't get federal funds in this area, because they are pulling. They were the ones who put in the DEI kind of requirements attached to this money. They're the ones that are pushing sort of these kind of placements. So we need to be really aware of what those federal grants are. It's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in to support this.
Well, let me go through a couple more of these. I mean, I know we're not talking about this specifically, but I just feel like it's super important. Copper Claus says the LGBTQ plus movement cult is very powerful, mean, and protected by the very system we're trying to change. It's a system so big, powerful, and evil, it'll take a huge voice to change it. And Mandy said, and I agree with Mandy, I'm sorry, but I do, because this is why parents indoctrinate and inculcate their children, if they're Christian, in the Bible early on. Here's the truth. If you distort the mind of a child from a young age, they have a very different perspective on what's right and wrong. This perverts all the things in their lives and changes their ideologies of all of the things that the child will move forward with learning. And if you tend to believe, like so many of us do, that Marxists are in charge of the government at this point in time, and the whole idea is to destroy society so it will crumble and just everything falls apart, and the haves, the globalists, take over. I don't see how you can't see that, because again, I'm not going to be the person who stands up and says, I mean, if you're gay, fine, but I'm not going to give you a child to raise. I don't think that's appropriate. I mean, you do you, I mean, whatever, but I'm not giving you a child to raise. I'm sorry, that does not compute for me. Statistically, the lack of a male and female parent in the home has more negative outcomes than positive. I have a feeling something good's going to be done. I hope so. Lisa says, when we became foster parents in California, we had to go through special training to ensure we would take the child to special gay counseling if the child even asked about it. The foster parents could not even enter the building while it happened. This was back in 2001. Trust me, it'll come to Oklahoma soon. Something will definitely get done. I'll make sure of that. I hope that. My sister had a caseworker that molested a little boy at a church camp. A caseworker. I could pull the articles, and they never dropped my sister's case, and she fought for 3 years. The entire system should be disassembled. It's now the injustice system. The government will never do the right thing. I think that's very true. Susan says, everybody can add me on Facebook, and then Gardenia will provide information. Julia says, CASA receives, and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier. CASA receives government grants. We've got to just stop depending on government to solve the problems that government creates.
Oh, Julia, I will tell you, and every good thing they add to the layers of government, give it a few years and it will turn bad. So I'm going to tell you that a woman that was involved up in Bartlesville, about what I was describing, she was a supervisor for DHS and child welfare. She opened a nonprofit for LGBT foster parents, okay? And then when a bunch of things went down about abuse in the system up there and the death of that child I told you about in a same-sex female home, she then left DHS and is now a supervisor, or was, I'll have to check to see if she still is, a supervisor for CASA up in the Tulsa area, where she has her own adopted child online advertising Pride t-shirts, CASA Pride t-shirts, when I was looking into this. So CASA is no longer the answer. Years ago, CASA was maybe older retired people who had already raised families that were a voice for the child, that could come in and spend time with the child and make sure the child's best interests were being served by the court and DHS. There have been a couple of heinous cases of child sexual abuses by CASA out of Tulsa that made the media. So what we have to remember, common sense vetting of people who are allowed to spend time with children has left the building in these government agencies. So look at this case here with the Lockmans and with the Harrisons. This man had a history in Kansas, an arrest history. They went to Texas for a while. They were married, came to Oklahoma. They came to Oklahoma, and he sought access to kids through schools, public schools, right? Became an emergency certified teacher. They immediately sought access to kids upon arriving in foster care and adoptive care. We have to start paying attention to the pattern that these people will want to become CASAs if they're seeking access to children for nefarious reasons. They're going to, just like they became Boy Scout counselors, how they became priests in the Catholic Church. We have to use common sense vetting about someone's life path.
So again, there are just so many good comments. It's just so hard to get all of them in here. But I did want to put this one up because I don't think people really understand this. But so much of our child welfare, everything we do with child welfare has to do with the Kinsey reports. And this was a man who was a pedophile.
Yes.
He was a psychologist who was a pedophile who masturbated babies.
Yes. Yes.
And this is the foundation for the training that these people often have. So, I mean, it's absolutely wrong. It started off on a wrong foot in the first place with the Kinsey stuff. And if you haven't looked that up, please look that up. He and his wife, oh my.
It is. It's a terrible case. And what you bring up is that also, when I talk about this government funded system and these layers that are making these bad decisions, the academia and the universities layered on top of this. And you see it within DHS. You saw it within the Department of Education until the last 2 years. It seems like every other person has a doctor in front of their name. And they're making these kind of decisions. And they're supporting these kind of placements.
Oh, and somebody says the news just reported on need of foster families. Mandy says there is a grand jury petition coming to Payne County. Contact me to help.
Excellent.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I misunderstood what Lisa said. Lisa said the idea that someone is safe solely because they are gay is untrue. That's my point. I'm sorry, Lisa, I misunderstood you. Thanks. DHS has always said they never want to remove children from families and that they want to help the family, but they're always the first to step up and take the child away instead of helping parents. That's such a true statement.
No case could illustrate that better than a mom who found the services herself, was thriving, was concerned about her baby. They were all set with those services and ready to take great care of Lincoln.
Okay, Susan says, OKDHS has had a complete reform, and a judge ordered that they had to meet certain requirements by a specific date. Not only did they miss the deadline, they missed every deadline they were granted with extension, and still to this day have not met the requirements. Gardenia says, everyone's welcome to add me on Facebook. Earl's daughter says homosexuality is a red flag, period. I have no doubt there are good gay parents, but why would the state ever place a child in an already morally compromised situation? Parb Casa sounds like more broken bureaucracy to fix broken bureaucracy. Less government is the solution. I'd rather live in a dangerous freedom than a peaceful slavery. And I'm going to just riff off of that just 1 second. And that is back in the day, private organizations took care of adoption. They took care of fostering. These were private organizations. The Baptist Children's Home being one of the largest in the state from probably the 1920s or the 30s. So here's what happened with that. Let's not forget what happened there. In Europe, they decided that it was wrong for children to be in these homes where they could be molested as a group by one bad actor. So, and we follow Europe's, I mean, you ask me what we follow It's weird. So we get our independence from Europe, and then we take all of their crappy plans, bring them over here, and then institute them and go, well, it's crazy. So if we were to go back to privatizing all of these things, I wonder if the legal system would actually function that way, because there wouldn't be ready-made state free money coming in to support CASA, to support judges, to support attorneys who all make money off of doing this child trafficking that we just saw so well here. So once again, the answer is less government, not more.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who don't really understand the history of child welfare in this country, the child welfare system is relatively new. These laws that started rolling into states, allowing states to step in and setting things like Title 10A in place, are 1970s things. Before that, there were institutions, churches, places that took kids. Law enforcement could step in. There were laws about it, and we did not have this. So now, fast forward 50 years, you've got a big mess.
And do they really only exist, Mary, because of the federal grants, the federal money pouring into these deals?
Oh, yes. The federal money that flows into child welfare is huge. It is no different than our state health agencies, like I've said, that ignore the pandemics that are specific to Oklahoma so they can push things like STDs and protected communities on us and those kind of things. Absolutely. The same dynamic where the money controls what's going on also happens in DHS. And it's really interesting when you go look at our state agencies' budgets and you start to see where the money is coming from and you start to track it back to the programs and what the requirements are under federal funds. There's a huge book of requirements under federal grant funds that has all kinds of things that Oklahomans would not agree with. So if you touch federal money, you're moving your society in a different direction.
Well, we've already always said that about schools. My God, the girls and boys the boys and girls bathrooms thing,
Mm-hmm.
the boys pretending that they're girls for sports. This all comes down from the feds, and yet somehow it's all okay because it's government. M says we need conservatives to be a part of these volunteer programs. They're overrun by progressives. A few of us are still hanging on to ruffled feathers, but we need more common sense people in these. Gardenia does say that they have a probable address, and so she'll get with you. Yep. Mandy says pedophiles' top 3 career choices are schools, churches, and juvenile centers. Gosh, really, I can't imagine. And Lisa says, and this is so true, if you're a Christian and teach your child about Jesus, you're indoctrinating them. If you're gay and do the same thing, you're being loving and open-minded. This is the schism that's creating this mess.
Mm-hmm.
And M says too, the Pinnacle Plan also caused change in the system where DHS stopped advocating for guardianship and advocated for state custody. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. A large amount of children are placed with family.
Yes. And there's a mandate that they should be attempting a kinship placement, which is a family placement above all others. That should be what happens immediately. But kind of like the case goal is reunification and everybody's going to support that, you don't always see it happening. And there's no real, it says that DHS should make efforts to do that. But there's no real black, dark, Sharpie line about you will do this. So there's so much wiggle room for people to misuse their power in the system.
We've talked about that on a broader scale. That happens in law. These legislators, they go to 39th and Lincoln and they make these laws, but they're too scared to put the dark Sharpie line in the sand, right? So they'll put that, well, if the then, and if then, and if then, and then all of a sudden you get this law that's a law, but it doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's the same thing we did with the parental rights law. I mean, you talk to any attorney about the parental rights law, it's literally meaningless. It just says you should do this. So then parents go, okay, well, I should do this. And the school goes, make me. And then the school hires an attorney with your tax dollars to then fight you, which you have to spend your own money to then fight them with your own attorney. It is ludicrous. It's the most unfree situation in the entire world. I am telling you, less government, not more. And the faster we start dismantling this stuff, but then again, what was our budget? $5 billion?
Yeah, exactly. So the state's budget is $12 billion and 6 of it goes to public education. So you start to whittle down here. You see how much in our state is spent and where people profit from it. So one point I also want to make, you made me in what you just said, DHS has a lot of these big mandates, these grandiose bumper sticker kind of sayings that it goes by. And one of them in recent years has been about home-based cases. We're not going to be taking these kids. That's one of the things that the Pinnacle Plan said. You're taking way too many kids into custody. You have no business doing that. We're going to put supports in place. If we go to a hospital and we think there's some kind of risk, we're going to watch it. That baby's going home with the family. We're going to assign someone to be helpful. We're going to put services in place. So even if the STAR program was ripped out from under the Lockmans, which it shouldn't have been with all the progress they made in that support, when they got to Cleveland County and delivered, this should have been a home-based case, if anything. It should have been a nothing. They should have come out and said this baby is safe. It does not meet the parameters under law that this child is an imminent threat of harm, and they should have walked away. But at the most, it should have been a home-based case. They wanted to give this child to someone, and then they give him back.
So Earl's daughter says, I can testify to government-funded child trafficking. I was placed in a government-funded unwed mother's home in 1992 as a teen. Weekly, we had workshops on adoption. There were no plans to help us be parents.
Interesting.
That's horrifying.
It is. Yep, it is. Well, those are the things. If you all will go to the article, you can either click through the headlines or really dig in if you need details, and consider contacting your legislators about this case. Here's the information. Consider contacting the hotline saying, we demand that you check on this child's safety. Just because the threat came from within the system doesn't mean they get to close their eyes.
Just that you contact the public resources director for the AG's office like I did. And I mean, his name is, I can actually put his.
Let's do it.
Here's his email address. So I suggest you reach out to him like I did. His address is on every single one of the daily or more
and if the AG doesn't help, Jenny, if the AG doesn't help and resolve this deal, then when during his campaign, this needs to be the actual spike in his heart that like takes him down because he didn't help here.
Wouldn't you think? We have a huge election year, state level election year coming up. Everyone's declaring their candidacy. Everyone in the House is planning to run for another term. Wouldn't you think they would all be stepping up to attack this issue?
Yep.
I mean, you could get reelected on this issue alone if you would come forward and start protecting kids. Where are they?
In the light,
because nobody really cares.
Yeah. Well, the light that needs to be shown onto DHS. I mean, there's people that need to be in prison over there, in my opinion.
I would not.
Okay, here it is. Phil.backrack@oag.ok.gov. He's the Oklahoma Attorney General Director of Communications for the Office of the Attorney General. And I just suggest you send him an email like I did. And my email basically said it would be, just saw this from Visit. It seems like this is child trafficking. This needs to be looked into immediately. Would you have your boss please do that? And I think that needs to get done.
Great suggestion. We have a lot of ways that if this is tugging on your heart, which I can see it is, like appropriately in the comments, that you can get involved on behalf of this child and this family.
Well, and Lisa says maybe we should all start a resource for unwed mothers that helps them keep their babies. I mean, and send it to the campaign of Gentner as well.
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this guy wants to be the governor of the state but can't save the state's families, he doesn't need to be governor of Oklahoma.
Correct.
All right. And like Gracie said, I think that they're all afraid to make serious waves and rock the boat. Nobody wants to say anything. I mean, because if you say anything against gay people or they perceive that it's against gay people, they'll just trash you. I mean, they'll do everything they can. And again, I want to point out how many people on this podcast today have basically said they go after, like Mandy Reed said, they go after the people who don't have money. Then if they actually stand up for themselves, then they'll go after them, do what they did to Gardenia, put her in jail, find something, oh, look, she has unpaid parking tickets. We'll just throw her in jail. I mean, they literally, bottom line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line. And God love you, Gardenia. We are just so brokenhearted for you. But you know what? You have got, we're behind you. And none of us on this podcast like government. So, I think you can pretty much, and this is Doug says the woman who initiated the state-sponsored kidnapping needs to be identified and investigated. Whoever this Jennifer person was, somebody needs to find her and
yes.
get her.
If he's talking about the CPS worker, her name is Jessica.
Oh, Jessica.
Her name was Jessica, and that is true. We need to be looking at the practices of these people.
We want to see your book, and maybe you need to come on. Maybe you need to message me and come on the show, and we'll have a show as you started the book, because this person says they're scared to tell their story because they're afraid of DHS retaliation.
Yes, they have a lot of power. They have a power to reach into people's extended family. I can understand why people would be hesitant.
Yeah.
I want to thank Andrew and Gardenia Lockman for being so brave and being so open and honest. They are incredible people. And I also want to thank Akitha Washington, who was the permanency worker who helped so many families get their children back and then was driven out of the system when she advocated for this couple. You are an exceptional human.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say this again, and it's not just because friends, I just mean this. If you had not started on this road, I don't know. Obviously I've been involved in Oklahoma education for years. I had no idea what was going on with some of these teachers until you came out and talked about it. I literally, you educated me. Like, that came out really bad. Like, that's not what I meant. I meant as a person who's pretty well educated, I didn't even know this is happening. So if that's the case, how can people who don't really follow any of this know what's going on?
Well, and I think one of the things you're bringing up, there's a huge connection behind both the child sexual abuse that happens in our public schools and what's happening within the DHS system. And that connection is the powerful people at our state capitol who are overseeing and allowing both. And the political tide that runs in the background of people that protect each other are legislative leaders. And I've talked about the Uniparty many times. The Uniparty is making decisions and deciding not to investigate things. They're making kids very unsafe on both fronts. I am so thankful at the fruit that has come from everyone who has exposed what's happening in public schools, and that we have some really clear thinking going on at the State Department of Education for the first time They put in an entire unit of really experienced people who are looking into that. Parents can bypass their own district and go to that state agency and make a report of abuse that happened in the school, and they will investigate it. And they have revoked a record number of teacher certifications to make schools safe. We need the same thing to happen in OKDHS. We need parents to be able to go around this system and come to somebody who will take action.
100%. Oh, and Gardenia, I hope you saw Lisa's comment there. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as usual, Mary, I am so grateful that you come on the show, and I'm so grateful to our viewers as usual, because without them, nothing could happen. So I'm just so grateful that people actually tune in to watch, and you're just amazing. And I just, every day, I'm so grateful that you're out there talking about this stuff, because at least it can't, at least the shadows can't cover it up. I mean, at least there's somebody out there, shining light on it. Yeah. It's just,
the system has a way of crushing and silencing the people it harms, and they deserve for their stories to be told. And I thank you both, Michael and Jenni, for giving a voice to this, and to your amazing viewers. Let's go out and make a ruckus. Let's get this kid back.
And I'll point out what Julia says. She hasn't thrown it in the comments, so she must be falling down today. But I'll point out what Julia normally says. Government is not going to investigate government.
Nope. Someone's got to come from the outside. And we do. Hey, we've got a few brave people in our legislature who showed that they can stand up against all of the trash that's happening. So we're engaging them. Come on, guys.
Well, and thank God for Gabe Woolley. I mean, thank God for Gabe. I mean, he's been a huge, and Gracie says knowledge is power. I mean, it's true. And without you out there to tell us about this stuff, it's not getting done. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you so much.
Thanks. You all have a great day. Appreciate the platform. You guys are great.
Well, and again, so are our viewers. Okay, Friday, we are going to have, I forgot about this. This should be a good one. So there is a lawsuit over the initiative petition law that was just signed by Governor Stitt. And there have been people who have been screaming and crying about it, pulling their hair out. It's taking away my rights. And that's fine, because, I don't want, less government, more liberty for the people. I personally read that and didn't see where it was taking away people's rights. So if you have a strong feeling about this and you want to engage in this, be here on Friday, because we're having David Bullard, who's going to come on and talk about the initiative. He was the author of the bill. So he's going to be here. If you have a problem with it, log on, watch, and ask him questions. It's so much better to do it this way than to just say, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. Well, let's walk through it and see what it actually is after we get finished. So be here on Friday at 9 a.m. for that. And again, thank you, Mary, so much. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you again on Friday morning at 9 a.m. with Senator David Bullard talking about the initiative petition process in Oklahoma. See you then.